Let's talk about the eligibility criteria for the NDIS, especially in the light of the recent 2024 legislative changes to the NDIS Act. If you're struggling to understand what is required of getting into the scheme, or you are helping someone else and need to understand the process a bit better, get a little guidance on what to do, where to go, and what kind of documents to provide, grab a coffee and settle in as we dive into the world of
NDIS application in 2025 edition.
Trust me, with the latest updates, you would want to pay attention. Now, without meaning to be doom and gloom right off the bat, it's important to set the right expectations. Applying for the NDIS does not guarantee approval for everything you might need. Every support request must meet a reasonable and necessary criteria set by the NDIS. In addition, because of the recent legislative changes in 2024, types of supports that are covered under the scheme have been significantly reduced, with the supports now being categorized as NDIS supports that are covered by NDIS and non-NDIS supports that are not funded. This means you must provide evidence to justify why a particular support is essential for your daily functioning and long-term goal achievement. Yes, the NDIS scheme is changing quite rapidly, and getting approval for supports has become more challenging than before. So it's crucial to approach your application thoroughly and strategically. In this video, I would like to go over the process of applying to NDIS, but also the recent legislative changes. So if you find this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, as it helps me immensely to grow my audience. Now, let's start simple and dive into the terminology. I promise it's going to be very simple. There are 3 different options or streams which come under the whole umbrella of the NDIS supports, which you can apply for. Number 1, early childhood, early intervention stream. This is for children with developmental delays from 0 to 6 years of age, and for children younger than 9 with a disability. So turning 9 is a key checkpoint determining if a child's needs are consistent with the broader eligibility criteria for the main NDIS stream. And the main NDIS stream is number 2, where anyone aged between 7 and 65 years of age can apply for. So number 3, it could be early intervention stream, which may benefit someone whose disability is fluctuating, or let's say the disability is at its early stage, and let's say they might benefit from a short support intervention. So early intervention can be accessed by both children and adults. It is often needed for a limited period only, and it's not intended to last a lifetime. So the primary applicant for accessing the NDIS scheme will be referred to as a participant or a consumer, usually a participant when they do meet the criteria and gain access to the scheme. For children under the age of 18, they will have a parent or a legal guardian who will be applying on their behalf. And for those 18 years and older, if they have a significant disability which prevents them from understanding the process or following the instructions of gathering the reports and applying for the scheme, they will have a plan nominee who will be acting on their behalf when speaking to NDIA or other providers. So simple enough, as I promised. If you have a question of where do I go to seek assistance with this process, because it is quite convoluted, it is difficult, it is complex, for lack of a better word. Now, NDIS is actually delivered through a network of partners and agencies that support participants in accessing NDIS. And these include early childhood, early intervention partners. So these specialists support with children aged from 0 to 6 who have developmental delays or disabilities. And these partners assess children's needs, provide early supports, and help families transition to long-term supports if needed. The partners typically include professionals such as occupational therapists, speech pathologists, early childhood educators, and developmental specialists who work with families to develop strategies that basically promote a children's development and participation in everyday activities. And they will be able to assess your child and essentially help you fill out the right documents and gather the right evidence for the application. Now, the other category of partner organizations in the community are local area coordinators. So these, or they are also actually referred to LACs, they assist participants aged 7 and 65 by helping them understand and access the NDIS. They also plan their supports and connect with community and mainstream services. Sometimes. Other times they might be quite busy and they will shuffle that work onto the support coordinators, such as myself. Now, the third partnering organizations are the remote community connectors in remote and indigenous community. Remote community connectors provide culturally appropriate supports to participants, ensuring they understand their plans and can access services tailored to their specific needs. These partners work together to ensure individuals with disabilities receive the supports they need to participate fully in their community. Now, let's jump online where I can actually show you how to access the list of partner organizations through the NDIA website. So you can start over here and select the state you are in to see the partnering organizations. From here, you can access a list of partner organizations that can assist you with accessing the NDIS. Now, I have left this link in the description below. So if you want to access that information about partnering organizations, go into the description and click the link to the NDIA website. So now let's look at the process of application. There are a few non-negotiables, criteria that you must meet. First, the age. You must be under the 65 mark at the time of applying for NDIS. But do not worry, this does not mean that you will be booted from the scheme once you turn 65. You actually have a choice whether you would want to continue with the NDIS supports or you would like to transition into aged care. This video is not about aged care, so unfortunately I won't be talking about that today. Next, the residency. You need to live in Australia and meet one of the following conditions. You're either an Australian citizen, a permanent resident, and also you could be a holder of protected special category visa. Next, the disability. The type of disability NDIS will cover are those that lead to significant and permanent impairments that profoundly impact your daily life. Remember, NDIS actually makes a distinction between disabilities which will be treated by Medicare and those supported by NDIS. So let's jump into the next point. With the recent legislative changes, criminal history checks are a required step for applicants and their nominees acting on their behalf. If you or your plan nominee have been convicted of a serious offense in the last 2 years, it could affect your eligibility or their ability to act as your nominee. Now, this doesn't necessarily disqualify you from applying or accessing NDIS, but it does mean that NDIA will assess risks and determine if the plan should be NDIA managed. It's another term to get your head around, but all it means is that the management of your funding will be quite strict and the NDIA themselves will be in charge of paying for those supports that you're going to be receiving. So safety for participants and preventing funding mismanagement is the priority here. Let's dive into the lists. The NDIA actually gets quite technical with their disabilities, what kind of disabilities they will cover. So if you jump into NDIS website, there will be 4 different lists. So list A basically are those conditions that are likely to meet the disability requirement. And the disabilities on this list include items such as cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, spinal cord injuries, and severe intellectual disabilities. By the way, I will leave a link to those lists in the descriptions below. Now, list B is the conditions that are likely to result in a permanent impairment. And they include autism spectrum disorder, level 2 or 3, multiple sclerosis, acquired brain injuries, and chronic mental health conditions with significant functional impacts. For the disabilities from this list, you do need quite strong evidence to meet the access for NDIS. Now, list C was actually only specific for Western Australia. It doesn't apply anymore. Let's move on to list D. So this list is for children under the age of 7 with permanent impairment or early intervention requirement. No further assessment required for these conditions that are on that list. If you can't find your disability on those lists or disability of someone you're applying on behalf of, you just need detailed evidence such as medical reports, functional capacity assessments, and expert opinions that demonstrate you need the support. Now, let's jump into the evidence that is required in order to access the NDIS. For adults, it is absolutely necessary to provide a support letter confirming your disability and when it was diagnosed. And this could be from your GP or it could be from a specialist who then puts it in a letter that this disability is permanent. You will require an ongoing support for the duration of your life, and whether there are any alternative solutions. So if there are no alternative solutions to this disability, then NDIS might actually be the right answer for you. Now remember, there are 6 different impairment categories that NDIA will now be using starting the beginning of 2025. Basically, the disability which you might have has to fall into at least one of the 6 impairment categories, which are physical, psychological, sensory, cognitive, neurological, and developmental. It will definitely help if you're able to provide a functional capacity assessment completed by an occupational therapist, a psychologist, or a physiotherapist. Usually the NDIA actually prefers occupational therapist report. So next, you also want to provide any reports from other allied health professionals. If you have ever seen a psychologist, a physiotherapist, or a dietitian, or behavioral specialist, consider getting reports from them as well, or support letters, to assist you with the access to NDIS. The other thing that could be used as evidence is of previous supports that you might have already had, including documentation from current or past disability service providers, which can include information about the types of support provided, the frequency and effectiveness. If letters from employer or schools can be gathered, great. If you have been a participant in mental health services or disability employment services, that is also good. Basically, providing a support letter from any type of support can be useful. But also don't forget that a personal statement outlining the impact of the disability on everyday life and support needs will also be very useful. So for children, developmental assessments from pediatricians or child psychologists confirming developmental delays or disabilities, early intervention reports from the ECEI partners, which I've mentioned previously in the beginning of the video, which assess children from 0 to 6 with developmental delays or children under 9 with disabilities. So they will go with you through the types of reports they will do. If there are any letters from school or daycare reports, they can be gathered. Great. The other type of evidence can be used as family impact statements, detailing how the disability affects the child's daily life and the family's ability to provide care. And also any type of allied health reports with clear evidence supporting the need for long-term NDIS supports. So basically, if you're able to provide as much evidence as possible from different specialists and organizations as you can, it is fantastic. And it also makes sense to make sure that all of the reports are unanimous in stating the disability, the impairments, and the impact it has on daily functioning. This is very important because I think whenever you deal with a person from NDIA, they don't have a lot of time, and reading through reports that have different types of things, different information, obviously they're going to be unique to the place from where that report is coming from, but essentially the main points need to be unanimous across all of the reports and support letters. If they're not, it's just going to add a layer of complexity to the person who's dealing with you. And let me tell you, NDIA sometimes does not have the time to read through all of the documents, so making sure that they are all unanimous is very, very important. So again, all of the reports should include a confirmed medical diagnosis from a qualified health professional, clearly indicating the permanency of the condition. Then the identification of which impairment categories the diagnosed condition falls into. Obviously, this only applies to the health professionals. Next, include detailed descriptions of how the impairment affect daily activities such as mobility, communication, self-care, social interaction, and learning. You need to provide explanations of which areas of life are most significantly impacted, such as ability to work, participate in social or community activities, or complete personal care tasks. Now, to improve your chances of a smooth approval process, make sure you provide all of the necessary documentation, such as the medical reports, formal diagnosis, and functional capacity assessments. The more detailed and well-organized your documentation is, the easier it will be when it comes to speaking with NDIA. If you are applying for a child, then an early childhood, early intervention pathway is the way to go for you, and you do need to contact an early childhood, early intervention partner in order to get the process started. For all of the other streams, you can contact local area coordination supports, or you can submit an access request online, over the phone, or with a paper form. So one of the biggest changes that have been implemented from 1st of January 2025 is the introduction of impairment notices upon meeting the access to NDIS. You'll receive an impairment notice that categorizes your disability into one or more 6 categories. This notice spells out exactly how your disability impacts key areas of your life, including mobility, communication, self-care, social interaction, and learning. If you ever need to amend the impairment notice, this can be done through submitting a plan variation. The bottom line is, if you're under 65, an Australian resident, and dealing with a disability that significantly affects your life, NDIS may be the answer for you. The paperwork to get into the scheme feels like you're probably prepping for like a 10-hour exam, but on the flip side, once you have access to the NDIS, you have funding towards crucial therapies, support workers, assistive tech, and hopefully chance to have more independence. Now, are there hoops to jump through? Absolutely. Reasonable and necessary criteria are the words that you will continuously keep hearing when dealing with NDIS. And yes, it can be tough to meet. But with thorough reports, evidenced by diagnosis, impairments, and functional limitations, basically painting a clear picture of how your disability actually impacts you, this will be your foundation during conversations with NDIA. Most importantly, don't let the complexity scare you off. My advice, take one step at a time and reach out to your local area coordinator or early childhood, early intervention partner. I truly hope you found this video useful, and please remember to like and subscribe for more useful information updates, and I'll see you in the next one.